Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Timpano, the editor of Boston Home, and I'm excited to welcome all of you to the virtual launch event for our new spring issue. To celebrate the occasion, we'll be using our time together this morning to take you behind the scenes of a very special story we produced for the issue called Houses of the Future, which shines a well-deserved spotlight on the many facets of local sustainable design. In addition to exploring topics like eco-friendly materials, the latest smart home gadgets, energy-efficient appliances, and green roofs, the feature showcases 3 sustainably designed local homes, all exceptionally engineered to minimize environmental impact. This morning, you'll be hearing from the creators of those homes via a series of short presentations, followed by a panel discussion moderated by yours truly. We've got lots planned for you, so to kick things off, I'd like to welcome my first guests, Derek Bloom of Bloom Architecture and David Bemis of Haycon Building, who will be speaking about a gorgeous geothermal vacation home set on New Hampshire's Lake Winnipesaukee.
Hey, Andrea, thanks for having us. So I'm David Bemis from Haycon Building. We're a design build firm in the Boston area that specializes in high performance buildings, mostly multifamily structures. So this project we're going to share, it's a little bit different for us. We don't typically do a lot of projects this far north, but it's certainly one we're very proud of and excited to share with the group.
Hi, I'm Derek Bloom, principal of Bloom Architecture in Boston. We're based in South End. We do both residential and commercial projects. We're a smaller firm, so we do focus a lot on single family homes, second homes, and with a specialty in sustainability as well. So we're excited to be here, show you our latest high performance building that we did in conjunction with Haycon up in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. The family really wanted to have a vacation and weekend house that had a long-term and multi-generational use. So it would be not occupied full-time, but hopefully would be very durable, sustainable over many, many years and generations. So in the site plan, you can see we're very far from the road. So the house is very protected from the street, but in terms of the lake, privacy was important. Minimizing the amount of tree cutting and impact on the woods was a key factor, as well as maintaining wetland buffer setbacks. And as you'll see in this next slide, the buildable area in the location we chose for the house was somewhat limited. There's a setback from the lake, and there are also vernal runoff areas that create other setbacks that you see here. And then, of course, the property line is somewhat near this part of the property. So the blue area represents essentially where you can build and not impact these environmental systems.
So a couple of assemblies we decided to utilize. Here you're seeing the Icf Foundation, which is an insulated concrete form, and that's a type of foundation. Really goes to the preformed blocks that are insulated on both sides that you build similar to how you would build like a Lego structure. And then those blocks are filled with concrete, and the benefit of that is that, you know, it's pre-insulated from both sides, so you get a nice thermal separation, both on the exterior of the building to the foundation, as well as a separation from your interior slab. This being a slab on grade structure, you get that isolation, that thermal isolation. Yeah, so with the framing, we had decided to go with a super insulated structure, and the easiest approach for us on this particular job was a double framed wall. And what this allowed us to do is, so you've got a 2x6 structural wall, you've got a 2-inch air barrier, and then you've got another 2x4 wall on the interior. And what that allowed us to do was to insulate the 2x6 wall as well as the cavity between the two wall assemblies to get a nice thermal break. And then that left the interior 2x4 wall for running of all our rough systems and as a service chase.
A few of the tech pictures, we used a geothermal system, which is a type of heat pump that uses the ground's naturally occurring heat at depth to get heat coming up through the heat pump and transferring the temperature from the ground to the house. And then that well is on the circulating pump that runs on electricity. And the house is all electric, including the cooking, heating, hot water, and air conditioning. We had determined we were going to use composite siding along the way, and it's a very low maintenance, high long lifespan product. To minimize waste, we worked with a few different concepts for how to cut the siding into modules on a 2-foot or a 4-foot module so that there would not be scrap. Here are just a few pictures of the finished product, just to kind of see some of the other sides of the house. So this is the front side where you approach by car. You can see the entrance down here, and in through this window, you would see the living room, dining room, kitchen area. Here's a screen porch. The lake is on the opposite side of the house from this photo. Picture of the living room. The fireplace was an ethanol fireplace, so it doesn't have a vent. It doesn't introduce any penetration in the building envelope, and provides that ambience for ski houses that is so nice. And outside, you can see the fire pit, which is another biofuel unit. Same room, looking the other direction, we see the kitchen and the screen porch beyond. And upstairs, this is the central organizing feature of the house, which is this kind of bridge and atrium. So as you come in the entrance, you enter under this lower space, and then the space expands into the living spaces. So you appreciate it both from above and below, as you can see in these two photos. And this is where you get some of the lake views from upstairs. And lastly, the bunk room, maximum capacity design for a lot of kids and guests, and for the family to really be able to maximize the enjoyment of the house. So thank you very much for taking a look at this house with us. We had a really wonderful time designing it and building it together, and hope you enjoy it too.
Thanks so much, Derek and David. I'd now like to introduce you to Paul Lukez of Paul Lukez Architecture, who will be sharing details about a special solar energy project in Harvard, Massachusetts.
Welcome to Paul Lukez Architecture Studio. We're absolutely thrilled to be part of Boston Magazine's feature on Homes of the Future. We think that sustainable design is at a tipping point right now. With recent developments and improvements in renewable energy technologies, a better understanding of passive house principles and best practices, along with the drop in price points on a lot of these ideas and technologies, we're in a position where it's no longer a question of whether or not we should build buildings as a net zero building, but the question is, why not? Today I'd love to share with you a story of a unique project for a retired academic couple. Meet Pat DeLue, a former vice provost, and Richard Jensen, a math professor. They asked this very question, why not? They had a dream of building a more resilient net zero energy home that was the right size on a bucolic site in Harvard, Mass. Not only is the house net zero energy, that is, it has a HERS rating of -23, but there's enough renewable energy produced to power the electric car for 10,000 miles a year. The house also has 2 sets of batteries that help with managing energy intermittency. The combination of PV, batteries, and an electric vehicle is, in our opinion, a game changer. Allow me to explain how the energy delivery matrix works today and how it can change over time. The typical house today gets its energy from the grid and gets supplementary energy either from oil or gas. Now with solar systems or renewable energy systems, your home can rely less on the grid and secondary carbon-based fuels. Plus, your monthly bill is bound to get reduced. This system works even better if we introduce batteries. The batteries store excess energy and renewable energy for use during the evenings and on cloudy days. They also add a layer of resiliency to the house and the energy systems, especially during storms. Plus, the batteries look really cool. Look at the battery by Sonnen, a German company that we used. And finally, we can add an electric car to the energy delivery system, such that the energy from the panels and the battery can be distributed to the electric vehicle. Adding batteries and EVs can also help increase the grid's storage capacity. Now, the process for designing a house of this type is like designing a conventional home, with, however, greater involvement with your engineering team early on in the process. Construction processes used in the house focused on creating tight building envelope and making sure that as little energy was lost through the building envelope itself. This requires a great contractor, which we were lucky to have in Donahue and Sons. So what do you have to sacrifice in having a net zero energy house? If anything, we think net zero energy homes can create higher quality environments, as we hope to demonstrate in this abbreviated tour of the house. Now, the house is gently sited on a crest of a hill where the roof captures as much sun as possible. The old farm stone wall acts as a kind of threshold to the house and carport, which is located on the left. The entry to the house is marked by a lower entrance canopy and structure. The roof eaves are generously proportioned to provide summer shade on the south side of the house. The living and dining room have taller ceilings and south-facing views of the lush landscape. A wood stove is only used on sub-zero days. The kitchen and dining room anchor the floor plan in the adjacent spaces. The mechanical room with the inverters and batteries is located above the kitchen. The master bedroom is on the east side of the house, capturing the morning sun and overlooking stone walls and the towering pine trees. The carport provides shelter for the Chevy Bolt, an electric vehicle. It also serves as a kind of entry gateway, framing views of the landscape. So in the end, what we find most fulfilling and rewarding is to see that our clients are happy with the project and that it has performed as anticipated. This would not be possible without the generous help and support of this project from our clients, Pat DeLue and Richard Jensen, and of course all the help and effort that went into designing and building this from our engineers, our contractors, and our consultants. Thank you.
That was great, Paul. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Horowitz of ZeroEnergy Design, who will be walking us through an impressive net zero house in Hingham.
Thanks, Andrea. As you mentioned, my name is Stephanie Horowitz. I'm an architect and managing director at ZeroEnergy Design. We are a firm based in Boston focused on architectural design and consulting for high-performance homes, both single-family and multifamily. We believe that carbon matters now. The homes that we design and build today will carry us well beyond upcoming climate goals for 2030 and 2050. They need to support these collective initiatives, not hinder them. We practice at this critical intersection between energy and architecture, taking a calculated approach to designing high-performance homes. Now, this way of designing and building reduces energy consumption and reliance on fossil fuels, but also improves the durability of the structure, the indoor air quality, and of course, the occupant comfort. We're looking to change the conversation to say that our structures need to be beautiful places to live, but they also need to reduce our energy use and reduce our carbon footprint. So on the portfolio page on our website, in addition to the photographs of our work, you'll also find predicted or actual energy use intensity. It's a measure of how much energy the home uses per square foot per year. A little bit like miles per gallon on a car, but lower is better. So our project in the current issue of Boston Home. And in working on this project, we employed the same simple approach that we use on every project. We start with design, then address the building enclosure, the systems, and renewables in that order. We started with a simple form and a gable roof. The gable is skewed to minimize the height of the structure and to maximize the south-facing roof surface for PV panels. And it also creates a nice form to the space below it. The views to the marsh are quite spectacular from an elevated location on the site. So we designed the main living space at the second level with generous south-facing windows and doors to capture the view. The living space expands onto the deck beyond, and it also serves as part of the formal entry sequence. The primary suite and workspace are above on the third floor. Bedrooms for the couple's teenage and adult children are located at the lower level, with additional living space over the garage for additional privacy. The building enclosure is the passive workhorse. The home has an air barrier where we can visually verify its integrity during construction and then test it at a point where we still have the opportunity to improve it. The home has a good winter coat, as all New Englanders should. The continuous insulation minimizes thermal bridging through the wood structure. And finally, the triple pane windows help to capture and retain the heat and are simply more comfortable for occupants, especially with the large expanses of glass that we have here. We heat and cool the home with an air source heat pump, decoupling the heating system from fossil fuels. And similarly, the hot water is also created by a heat pump hot water heater. The energy recovery ventilator, which is extremely important to pair with the airtight detailing, introduces a continuous stream of fresh air throughout the house and exhausts stale air. Finally, the already minimized electricity use can be offset with the solar or PV array on the roof. So some fairly recent energy data, the house at high occupancy has been offsetting about 66% of its electricity use. And the resulting UI, or energy use intensity, is 5.4. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. At this time, I'd like to welcome back all of our speakers to chat a bit more about sustainable design and hopefully address a few topics beyond what readers will discover in our feature. So thank you all again so much for taking the time to participate today and share your work. I don't think there's much of a question at this point that building and designing sustainably is critical to the health and longevity of our planet, but I can honestly say that I myself had a few aha moments while researching and editing this story, where the urgency of this type of design approach and really an overall life approach became that much clearer for me. So on that note, I'd like to start things off today with a question about your backgrounds and ask each of you what it was that inspired you to take on sustainable design as a specialty, or at least a focus in your work, and whether you can point to a specific learning experience or perhaps a moment in your career that might have guided you in this direction. And Derek, we'll let you start it off first.
Sure. Thank you very much, Andrea, for including us in this panel, and love to explore more about everyone's projects here. Really beautiful work from my fellow panelists too. For us and for me personally, you know, I worked early in my career at Cow Design Group under Ken Cow, who passed away a few years ago. His work was just beautiful, and we were working mostly in the British Virgin Islands in Northern California, which even though we were based here in Boston, so those areas have really a more ingrained sense of sustainability. It's both in the regulations, and also I think the whole building community embraces it a little bit more than we see in the East. So things like, you know, in the Virgin Islands, you have to capture all of your rainwater and use it, you know, in cisterns. And in Northern California, there are all these processes for, you know, looking for endangered species before you go into a site. And there's benefits and kind of incentives for solar, and I think there are penalties for size. There's also more affordable housing where people have to build a second living unit rather than are not able to. So there's a lot of those projects really just stuck with me, and I saw that this could be the starting point of a project and not something you try to bring in or have to convince others to do. It really can be the foundation of a project, which I think for me, that was the biggest experience.
Yeah. Paul, what about you?
Well, as you say, I mean, it's just so rewarding to be able to work on projects that have, you know, a benefit to society, knowing that in some small way, our profession can contribute collectively to addressing this problem. And, you know, for me, I've always been interested in sustainable design. I won't date myself, but back in undergraduate school, we actually designed some solar panels. We were, hot water solar panels as part of a studio exercise, and that got me going. Fast forward 15 years, I was in China working on a project with Brooks Mastu and Ju Zhan, our partners, working on a 50,000 square foot sustainable pavilion. And we went to visit the project during construction, and it was about 90 degrees outside, maybe even 100. It was extremely hot and humid. And we were in the space, the building envelope was just about done, and yet we felt very comfortable and cool. And I realized at that moment, my gosh, these design principles actually work. And so that really helped launch us. And since then, we've done about 30 projects, either planning or architectural, that are sustainable.
Great. And Stephanie?
Thanks, Andrea. I think that my commitment to environmental stewardship probably predates my interest in design and architecture. And for me, the two are really inextricably linked. And I think our firm probably has like a unique perspective in that this is the only way we practice architecture. And for us, it's a best practice, it's commonplace. And we're really motivated by the challenge of making energy efficiency beautiful.
Love that. And David?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like a lot of current designers and builders working, I mean, they're certainly my generation and younger, there's already a bit of an awareness about these issues. But I think in terms of uniqueness to what I have done, throughout my career, I've been a practicing architect, been a builder, also a developer and a landlord. So, fairly early on, I had identified the value to kind of a low operating cost, low maintenance, client satisfaction, tenant comfort, and even marketability of these projects. So I think all of that combined has really been it's made it a real natural fit for us at Haycon. And certainly it's, there are very few projects we do these days, mostly, some legacy clients, but very few projects we get involved with these days that aren't high performance in nature.
Yeah. So speaking of that familiarity with, clients becoming more aware of these issues in general, obviously, given the nature of your businesses, I imagine that most potential clients who reach out to you guys are already interested in sustainable design and probably know a thing or two about it. So I'm wondering how you go about educating clients who are maybe less familiar with this type of building or perhaps not totally sold on its merits. So Stephanie, I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we explain our kind of general approach to start with design, then focus on the enclosure systems, and finally renewables, in order to have kind of a general framework for our process and our approach to each project. But I think when it comes to the benefits, especially for homeowners, we focus on thermal comfort, healthier indoor air quality, that the homes are quieter, they have improved durability, lower and predictable utility bills, and finally a smaller carbon footprint. And I think that those attributes of these projects are appealing to most homeowners, and that is that's sort of what we explain.
Derek, do you have something to add? What's your elevator pitch?
Easy to meet. I think we probably have less clients coming to us specifically for sustainable design. It's maybe half of the time and not all the time. So yeah, there's a lot of onboarding and kind of education to do, and trying to, we don't always get to the full performance with every client, but similarly, we look for common goals. So, they generally, obviously, budget is a concern to people. Is there a way to reduce the operating cost and the cost of building, health of themselves, their families, their businesses. So these are kind of common goals where you can start to get the conversation going about sustainability and how that's a path to these same goals maybe for a different motivation, but we can get to the same place. And then once that conversation started, we find that people are a little bit more open to trying to push it further, get to certain targets or goals and really have it infuse the whole project.
Yeah. David and Paul, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I guess we're a little bit more like Derek's firm. We've got a mix of clients. Of course, we like to see every project or every client that comes through our doors to do something sustainable. And we certainly try to make a pitch for it.
Yeah.
We've done many of the same arguments that Stephanie's so successfully done over the years, which are really effective and powerful in and of themselves. But if all else fails, we'll make an appeal, especially to those that are parents and grandparents, to their kids and their grandkids, and saying, look, if you don't do it for anybody, gift this for your kids, your offspring, and for the next generations. And I think the millennial generation and younger generation is very much attuned to the needs and benefits of this. So that really helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and one interesting approach we've taken, because we are developers and we are building owners and things, we are able to test a lot of these products. Whether it's a heat pump dryer or something like that in our own unit. So we can take a block of 40 units maybe we're doing, and we can allocate 5 and say, look, we're going to test this product that we're not at all sure about how it's going to perform, and it gives us some insight. And I find it the ability to say, hey, listen, I've had this in service for a few years. Come by, look at it. We can give you a tour of one of these buildings, and honestly, you can walk into one of these buildings and just the air quality. I mean, it's very easy, quick to perceive. But we find that takes a lot of anxiety out of some clients' hesitation towards things they haven't tried in the past, or technologies that concern them a little bit just because they're not familiar with it. So that's a powerful tool we've used.
Yeah. And question for the larger group, relative to cost, I think one myth, and I do think it's a myth, if it's not, please let me know, is that building, with this kind of energy efficiency, minimal environmental footprint in mind is a lot more expensive than not. Is that true?
Yeah, no, we actually have not found that. Certainly recently, I think there is some historic precedence for that would validate that line of thinking. So I don't want to say it's never been that way, but I think, today we're seeing a variety of products on the market that are incredibly approachable. I mean, just the fact that you can get a triple glazed high performance window out of Europe for the same price that you're paying from a mid-level builder grade product at this point, I mean, it is astonishing, to be honest. It doesn't make any sense if people are not using these things every day. So, but I do think it's easy to kind of fall back on that. And again, it's very historically valid. It has been a more expensive approach, but I think today it's very much on par. And even and if you count in the life cycle savings, I mean, it's really. In my mind, it's a no-brainer, but though I do understand it, there's still some hesitancy.
Yeah, the life cycles. Yeah, there's certain things that seem to be free, kind of low-hanging fruit. The passive solar design, where if you just design in a smart way, you can get the sun to help heat, and you can, in the summer, use the form of the building to shade and cool. Certainly, like minimizing the surface area, the volume ratio of a building helps you with how much envelope you have. So there's certain things that are somewhat free and should be done as practices. And then there's the stuff that you have to buy,
Right.
systems and things, which obviously, as David mentioned, like the life cycle cost is where you can sort of demonstrate that they may cost more in some cases on day one, but over any kind of time span, you end up being similar, if not more affordable in some cases. So. Yeah.
Stephanie, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think we share a similar perspective. There are certain premiums, but I think that is true, of any kind of design or specification decision. When it comes to ventilation systems, we can spec one that's the most efficient that's available in the market, and we can spec one that's a notch or two below that. The difference is not exactly in energy use, but in comfort, and that's a choice. So we have a lot of kind of options available to help control cost when that's important to the project and to the client. But We also, see like really economical options for windows, like David said, coming out of Europe, and just a number of options for domestically sourced products that allow us to do what we do, and also to kind of cost shift within a budget. So an insulation package on one of my projects may cost more than the insulation package on kind of a comparable project, but we'll see a decrease in the cost of the heating and cooling system, for example. So I think that a lot of these elements really need to be treated synergistically to understand how they perform as a whole, and not to kind of point to a specific element that may be more or less expensive than kind of conventional construction practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I would totally concur with points made, that it would be unwise, let's put it that way, could use other words, for not using best practices. I mean, every house is going to need windows. Putting them in the right place is a no-brainer, and we have the ability to do that. But what I find particularly exciting right now is as we experience increasingly lower costs for renewables, is starting to look at the renewable package over a 25, 30-year life cycle as also a potentially investment package. So if you start combining that with battery systems and with your car, then you start creating a new network of potential price advantages to investors. In fact, some of our consultants have actually done an analysis, and while the numbers are still early to share, it looks very promising. One can start looking at the investment in renewables, your electric car, your battery system, as an entire investment system, the return rate, which becomes very competitive, not with Bitcoin, but with certainly other stocks.
Yeah, and to touch on that, and a few others mentioned in this last response, the idea of things that you can buy and invest in as being a big part of sustainability as a whole, which makes me think of material selection, of course, which is a super important part of sustainability. And we touch on this a little bit in the package. We have a fun little sidebar on some cool eco-friendly materials to consider for building projects. But I'm wondering, what are some of your favorite sustainable materials or finishes, and sort of how you use them? So Derek, I'll let you go first.
Maybe. So I like to think of what matters the most in a project. So in my view, the finishes, meaning the architectural finishes such as counters and tiles, I try to avoid the pitfall of thinking that if a few nice looking things at the end are considered green, that somehow we did something sustainable. It's common. You'll see it, a little bit in the media and in promotion of people's projects. Of how green it is, but in fact, a much more impactful thing is what Stephanie and Paul are alluding to, which is kind of the infrastructural stuff, and David too, with the what are the utility systems? What is the utility demand of the project? How well is it insulated? I mean, if we think about the life of a building, which hopefully is getting longer and longer, the finishes make up this little bit of a fraction of the embodied energy and the expended energy to build and operate a house. So that's my caveat, my long-winded caveat. But I do have some favorite finishes. So, bamboo is among the greats, the all-time greats of sustainability in my view. It's a grass and not a tree. It grows phenomenally fast. It's very durable. It's harvested and renewed at this incredible pace. So I'm going to put bamboo and plyboo, which actually you'll see in the project that we showcased. That is one of the favorites, and then quartz is another one if people are looking for a nice recycled content surface to use in a house. So those are my two favorites.
Awesome, David. Do you want to take it next? We just mentioned your project.
Yeah. So I am always a big advocate of fairly easy envelope upgrades, whether it be an upgrade to the window and glazing package, or whether it be an upgrade to the vapor barriers, whether we're moving to a SIGA product or some high performance envelope. I find that stuff, if I can get that worked into a project, that it goes a long way for the comfort and and other aspects. I don't a lot get involved with interior finish selection, so it may not be the best person to approach on that front. But in terms of things that I always like, that are the first thing my go-to, it's generally air sealing envelope upgrades, things like that. That's really where my first pressure point.
Yeah, seems like that resonates with you a bit, Stephanie.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I agree with Derek's caveat that, you kind of have to weigh decisions in the grand scheme of things. And when it comes to finishes, we look at the aesthetics, we look at the durability, and we look at the environmental impact. And as long as we're sort of looking at each selection through that lens, we know that we're going to make good decisions. When it comes to more of the kind of workhorses that David was talking about, that are part of the building enclosure, one of the kind of, I guess, more recently available products that we've been using is wood fiberboard insulation as an alternative to kind of foil-faced polyisocyanurate, for example, which is a petroleum-based product. So that's been a kind of a great alternative. It's currently imported, but I'm hopeful in the next couple of years we'll be able to get the rigid boards coming out of Maine, relying on their kind of existing forestry infrastructure. So a lot of great choices, and both that are available domestically and through imported products.
Yeah. And Paul, what's standing out to you these days?
Well, I think everyone's made great points about things that are out there right now, which is exciting, especially as the field evolves. Let me put a plug in for a retro approach and a forward-thinking one, a more speculative. And that is that, for instance, what I noticed when we were in China is that there's very often people reuse materials in very clever ways. So one of our projects, we actually looked at incorporating some of these processes. So when demo is done, a building is demolished, every tile is collected and stacked and coated. So we thought, why not use those tiles for facades? So I'm not suggesting we import Chinese tiles, roof tiles here, but certainly there are things in our environment that we can reuse in interesting ways. And that gets to this idea of circular economy. Forward thinking, I was in Switzerland just before the pandemic and saw some amazing sustainable projects there. There was a product that I saw that was really something else. It was called SAF, so it's a solar activated facade by Lucido, and it's done by an architect and affiliated with ETH in Zurich, and it provides just crazy numbers on the R value, depending on which facade you're facing. And it's also very beautiful, as you might imagine, from anything made in Switzerland. So my point is that there's some really great new ideas developed in the marketplace right now, and designers, engineers, builders were all at the center of that conversation.
Yeah.
But some of that also means that we can look back and reuse materials in clever ways.
Yeah, I love that idea of reusing materials. That's a great tip for the interior designers on the call, of which I know there are many. So on that note, what advice do you guys have for fellow architects, interior designers, and builders who are interested in incorporating more sustainably minded principles into their practices, but perhaps haven't figured out the best entry point for doing so? I'm wondering what your advice is there. And Paul, we'll let you start first.
Well, mine is really simple. I think it's what we've touched upon, is that if as designers and architects and engineers, we just think about the proper massing of a house or the building and siting the house in the right place. That's half the battle, because then it sets up all kinds of possibilities or limits possibilities. If you put your roof in the wrong place, you may not have optimal solar exposure for roof panels if you want to put them on now or in the future. So the tools are out there, are very powerful, digital tools for modeling this. And it's very easy to take a deep dive and get an immediate return in terms of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. David, I saw you nodding, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, from my standpoint, as a builder, probably the best thing you could do is to really educate yourself on incentive programs and to really know those to the best your ability, as well as cost, because it is a bit of an uphill battle sometimes with the to get people to understand the cost implications. So I would say, education on that front can go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derek, what are you thinking about?
I think for people getting into this at the start of their careers, some of the strategies that we talked about that maybe are not, as Paul alluded to also, that maybe are not super technical. Get an understanding of passive solar design and what are the parameters for good building practices before you get into technology and things that may be a little deeper and harder to understand. And also, consultants are a big part of it. So you wouldn't be expected to know everything personally. One of the great values of any rated building or a building that kind of gets a certification, or even now, it's more common to have a HERS rater or someone like that on a project where you get results at the end, because there's a lot of unknown. As a designer, you're so deeply into a project, and then when it's completed, you may or may not ever see the house again. And you don't know if it was cold or hot, and you don't know if they were comfortable or if it was quiet. You just hope it was. But when you get kind of a result and a testing-based process involved in a project, you get at least that feedback in the end. Is how did it perform? Like, did the projection in the model come to fruition? And that, for me, is really a big part of the education, is the confirmation phase.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Exactly. Stephanie, what are you thinking about?
Definitely agree with the perspective that's been shared to start with design. And from there, I think some more maybe specific resources, depending on profession and interests. One would be looking to join the AIA's 2030 commitment. Is a great place to start. It requires you to look at your whole portfolio and not just the kind of the shining stars, if you will, but to look at predicted energy use, and you get access to a lot of kind of great data and benchmarking to see how you're doing compared to other professionals. So a lot of great kind of resources connected to that program to look at, as Derek said, measuring and kind of tracking change is a really great place to start.
The 2030 project, you said?
The 2030 commitment. Commitment.
And what does 2030 refer to?
It's a target date. So for kind of improving incrementally
Gotcha.
the performance of an individual firms or practitioners, the energy performance of their projects. So looking at kind of a percentage reduction in energy use over time. And there are some benchmark standards that unfortunately not too many firms are hitting. But I think that the exciting thing is that there are a lot of firms participating. There are great opportunities for mentorship to understand how firms are modeling and tracking energy performance, so that you have kind of a starting point to begin to kind of improve efficiency and really improve your portfolio of projects as a whole over time.
That's great. That's a great resource. I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you. So last question before we wrap this up. Of course, green building is not a new concept, but it does seem to have gained more traction and government support in recent years. For example, the Boston Planning and Development Agency recently announced the launch of the Zero Net Carbon Building Zoning Initiative, kind of a mouthful, to help the city work towards its goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, which sounds a little bit about like this 2030 commitment that you were just mentioning, Stephanie. So I'm wondering what sorts of things are on your personal wish lists for local sustainable design and construction, or Another way to think about this would be, what else have you observed lately that's sort of given you hope for a greener future? And Stephanie, I'll let you take this one first.
Sure. I think that the Boston initiative is a great one, and there are many towns in the greater Boston area that have these local initiatives that are kind of leapfrogging the state code in many respects. When I started out, we referred to the building code as describing the worst possible home or building you can legally design or build. And I think I'm hopeful because I've seen that change. The stretch energy code is an improvement, and I think what's to come is the net zero stretch energy code, which is currently being debated as part of the next generation climate bill. And so we hope that people chase the carrot, but ultimately the building code and the energy code is the stick. And so I think that what we're all talking about is a really great place to start, and to acknowledge that this is the direction that the market is going. This is the direction that the code is going. And now is a really great time to kind of get ahead of the curve and to learn how to design and build buildings that meet these high levels of performance. There are innumerable benefits, and the change is coming. So that's what makes me hopeful.
Yeah. David, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess if I'm putting, on my developer hat, I would love to see, more tax incentives for different systems. I think we did a geothermal system on this particular project, and that really became possible because of tax incentives that have since started to phase out a little bit. So, I'd love to see things in that realm. And then additionally, just local zoning, I'd love to see maybe some density bonuses worked into local zoning to incentivize these larger projects, hitting some performance metrics. So that would be on my wish list of things I think would help. Like, it is going there. It's going to eventually get there, like, very rapidly, like Stephanie said. But I think that would help jumpstart some of these projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Paul, what's on your wish list?
Well, first off, I could just say that I'm really pleased to see what my own town's doing, Lexington. They've got this clean heat initiative, which is really looking to the future and saying, look, we're going to be completely electrified. Let's make sure that every building that's built today, every house, whether it's a major retrofit or a new house, is electrified. And that's going to be huge. But it also raises a question as to how do we begin to transition? How do we deal with the issue of retrofit from a design point of view and engineering, especially when we're in a community as rich with history as New England is? I see, with one hand, great projects being retrofitted, but then you see the condenser units and the ugly piping on the outside of the facade, and sometimes it has an aesthetic impact on the community. I think there's a design opportunity there for our community to come together and figure out some new ideas. So I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah.
Derek, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, the electrical topic is interesting too, because I think in our careers, probably most of us, the pendulum has swung from, ripping out very inefficient electrical heat and things like that in houses and trying to get natural, get rid of oil, obviously, but get natural gas to be the source. Like, this is years ago. And as renewable energy, solar and wind have come on legitimately to power the grid more and more, the pendulum swinging back to all electric, which is now, I think, the goal. It's something in our Winnipesaukee house that we did. And so to see that now we're ready to accept a greater amount of input from the grid, from renewables, is great. So that's just an interesting development that has really shifted. Wish list, I guess I'll go to a different topic. I think renovation, which is inherently an act of conserving resources and preservation in a sense. I believe we do a good amount of that too, in addition to new buildings. And I feel like we're a little bit unregulated when we're renovating. It's sort of like, do whatever you want. It's a renovation. And in a sense, I'd like to see a little bit more, without discouraging renovation, I'd like to see a little bit more code control of and kind of mandatory improvements to envelopes and things on renovation specifically. In New England, very hot topic because we have a lot of old building stock and a lot of renovation going on. So that's something I would like to see.
Yeah. Does anyone want to respond to that? I saw a lot of interest. All good? Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much for taking time out of your day to do this with me. I sincerely appreciate it. And your thoughts and insights are so helpful and have given me personally a lot to think about. So thank you all again so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to meet everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
As our event comes to an end today, there are a few more people I'd love to acknowledge, all of whom have played a super important role in bringing this issue to life. So big thanks to Holly Gagney, Zoe McManus, Kara Feynman, Pauline Curtis, Atsu Gunther, Joshua Karpluk, Donna Hochman, Jill Littner-Kaplan, Will Rule, John Welsh, Alexis Servasio, and last but definitely not least, Lisa Tharp and Carpenter McNeil, whose incredible Concord renovation appears on this issue's cover. Thank you so much for sharing your work and stories with us. And thank you so much to all of you at home for taking time out of your day to celebrate the release of the issue. It's been awesome to connect today, and I sincerely appreciate your support. So thank you all.